Carlos Alcaraz has just dethroned the king of tennis. That's right, in this year's Wimbledon final, Carlos Alcaraz went head-to-head with Novak Djokovic, who is probably the GOAT of tennis at this point, took him on and defeated him in a 5-set thriller. Probably one of the best games of tennis that I've ever seen. Now, again, I'm super young, so I haven't seen too much tennis. I've just got into it, the sport. But I'm telling you, I don't know if there will ever be a match that tops what I've just watched at this year's Wimbledon, with the only pit stop in his winning streak having been Carlos Alcaraz, beating him in, the US Open last year for Carlos Alcaraz's first ever Grand Slam. And now the man has two. He has two major titles, and he's only 20 years old, and I don't think he's slowing down. Now, while Novak may currently be the GOAT of tennis, I think Carlos Alcaraz, with barring any setback due to injury, may pass this man in a little less than a decade. Now, I'm reaching. But the talent this man bestows at 20 years old is remarkable. And again, he is playing like a 36-year-old Novak Djokovic. But let's be real, in every other game that Djokovic had in this year's Wimbledon, he was looking like the best player alive currently. And yet, he goes head-to-head with Carlos, and it's not a completely different story, but hell, it was a masterpiece to watch. Let's just take a deep dive here, right? I mean, in the first set, Novak took control of the match, and I do mean control, beating Alcaraz 6-1. It wasn't close, but really, Carlos he was just warming up. He was just warming up was all. Because in the second set, they would go to a tiebreaker. It would go 7-6 in favor of Carlos Alcaraz. Yes, the second set was a brutal set, very back and forth heavy, but Carlos did pull away to tie the matchup 1-1 at this point. And, he stole the momentum that Novak had gained in that first set when he sweeped him. And in the third set, it got a little spicy here because Carlos Alcaraz 6-1 to Djokovic in the third set, after, Djokovic had did the same thing to him in the first set. So at this point, the momentum had a complete switch. After winning 6-1, Djokovic lost everything. I mean, it seemed at this point. He lost the second set very tight, got blown out in the third set, and now Alcaraz was only one set away from taking Wimbledon from a man who hadn't lost the event since 2017? That's crazy. Djokovic has won the last 4 Wimbledons, and there was a Wimbledon missed to COVID. But, besides that Wimbledon, he had won every other one for the last 4 or 5 years. So Djokovic did not lose in Wimbledon, which is why when the fourth set came around, the Joker put everything on the line. He went out and played for his career, which is really what it seemed like. Because he would go out and he would win 6-3, sending this to a 5th set. And of course this would go to a 5th set. How else would a storybook ending like this even come to close if it wasn't going to be in a 5th set? Now, heading into the 5th set, there had been 2 sets that were complete blowouts in opposite directions, but this wasn't the case for the final set. It was actually quite close. Very close, in fact. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was back and forth, everyone got a point, but it didn't matter because Carlos Alcaraz hit 6 points while, Novak only got 4, losing the 5th set 6-4 and losing Wimbledon to a 20-year-old phenom, following in the steps of another great Spaniard like Rafael Nadal. Now, I mean, taking up Nadal's mantle is no easy task to do, but I do think if anyone was going to do it, it was going to be Alcaraz, who led Spain to greatness in the tennis world. It's like every year there's some fantastic Spaniard. I mean, if it's not Nadal, it's got to be Alcaraz, of course. Of course, he has an apprentice, right? That's kind of what this is. Anyway, Alcaraz won his 2nd ever major, and I doubt he is stopping here. I mean, I don't see anybody in the world besides Djokovic, who he just beat, that can slow this man down, as the US Open for 2023 is right around the corner. This is why I love tennis. There is almost no breaks. Now, that must be terrible for the tennis players' bodies, obviously. I mean, there is a big break between the US Open and the Australian, I think. But, besides that, I mean, the Wimbledon in US is kind of back-to-back. They're looking at, a month break before the US Open takes place, later this summer. I would say late summer, early fall. that's basically when the US Open takes place. And Carlos Alcaraz is not only looking to repeat, but looking to defend his title, because he did win the US Open last year, and there haven't been consecutive US Open winners for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. No one's won back-to-back US Opens back in the mid-2000s, and since then, no one's even come close to winning back-to-back US Opens, and I think Carlos Alcaraz has something to say about that. Now, Nadal did get close. He won like every other year, but he never went back-to-back. You know, who knows? I do think Carlos Alcaraz, if anybody's going to do it, he's going to win back-to-back US Opens. But I do think this sparks a fire under Novak, who currently sits at 23 Grand Slam titles, leads all men ever, but he wants that 24th to not only tie Margaret Court, but eventually pass her with 25, with the most ever Grand Slams held by a single person. I mean, Margaret Court currently has 24, Novak has 23, and sure, he's leading all men, but I'm sure he wants that 24th one just to say he's the best. Because maybe Nadal comes back in time. I know he's dealing with injury, but maybe Rafa comes back in time to compete for a possible chance at the US Open and get his 23rd. And you know, if Rafa ends up getting his 23rd, he could tie Novak, and all of a sudden the GOAT debate kind of picks up again. But I don't know if the GOAT debate when it comes to tennis should simply be just surrounded by the number of major titles that you have. You know, because again, Roger Federer was probably one of, if not the best to ever do it, and he has 20 majors. So who knows? I don't know if the GOAT debate should be decided by the number of titles you have, the same way that it's not like the NBA debate for GOATs is decided by the number of rings you have, because then it'd be Bill Russell. Bill Russell has 11. But that's not how it's decided, right? It's decided off talent, skill, winningness, obviously. I don't know. I'm not a tennis head. But what I do know is that Carlos Alcaraz is going to be in those convos after 5 years? After 5 years, there's no way that Carlos Alcaraz is not held out of the GOAT debate, because he is going to be the greatest tennis player of all time. Hands down. But that's about it for the video. Catch y'all later. Much love. Peace.